Going into Donkey Kong Bananza, I was already sure I was going to have a great time, which, going by the typical 1 to 10 approach, would make it about an 8 or maybe a 9. What I didn't expect was a 10. Now, I'm no journalist or professional game reviewer or anything like that, but I've played enough games in my life to know the objective difference between a great game and a statement game that's so good that it becomes, or at least borders on being a new metric for a design in its genre. And make no mistake, that's exactly what Bananza delivers. When I picked it up, I was excited, but also a little bit skeptical. So today I wanted to go over the specific points of skepticism that I had going into Donkey Kong Bananza, and how it legitimately surprised me not just by answering these concerns, but obliterating them outright. And for starters, I was concerned about DK's movement. He's a beefy boy, and I was worried he might feel lumbering or awkward to control and just not well suited to 3D environmental navigation, or that the speed would feel off somehow. If it's butter smooth, DK wouldn't feel grounded and believably occupy the space. If he was too slow or too stiff at his animations, well then he'd get overwhelmed by smaller foes, or worse, be a chore to control in environments as destructible as what Bananza has to offer. But DK really does nail the balance. He's fluid but deliberate, powerful but not unstoppable, and while he's surprisingly agile in any direction, you still have to be mindful of your surroundings and the materials that make up those surroundings to maintain momentum. From the moment you first smash through to a literal mini sandbox to test your mobility, it feels perfect. It might be a little bit finicky whenever you have to make DK smash upwards, but it's hardly impossible, and honestly, any time that I felt myself digging too greedily or too deep, I felt a little bit of squirreliness was kind of on me for smashing downward with total disregard for how I was going to get back up. And while I did occasionally have to scratch my head for a moment to sort out how to get back to where I once was, it always ended up being a fun little mini challenge rather than any sort of outright frustration. Which kind of brings me to the next major point of concern I had going into this experience, and that's just how well these fully destructible environments were going to work in practice. But crucially and thankfully, these environments aren't fully destructible. They are mostly destructible, which works out perfectly. And my initial concern was because I'm old enough to have been there for the first Red Faction release on the PS2 way back in 2001. And I was so excited for that game because of its Geomod engine, which allowed for basically every wall or structure to be completely demolished. And while it was pretty amazing at the time seeing these kind of physics rendered out in a console game, I wouldn't put the original Red Faction up there as one of my most memorable experiences from the 6th generation. And remembering this, I was a little bit concerned about how Nintendo was going to go this route, particularly with one of the most iconic characters in their roster. But thankfully, it doesn't take long to realize that Nintendo's implementation sidesteps most of these concerns. In some cases, going the nigh full destructible environment route can make games sort of boring, and at worst, they can be totally game-breaking. Which I'm guessing is a big reason why you don't see it used that often nowadays. That, or maybe another factor, is it's computationally expensive. But despite maybe the occasional dip in frame rate, Nintendo has nailed making this system feel fun and reliable. Sure, you can smash through just about anything you can see, but each new layer you encounter en route to the planet's core is overflowing with unique ways to use the diverse mix of materials on offer. Some are slippery, some are dense, some have uniquely weird properties that completely rethink the standard sort of platforming playgrounds you've traversed in 1,000 other 3D adventure games. And while a lot of the destructibility is built around finding unique solutions to environmental puzzles or hidden Banandium gems, it also gives you plenty of areas to just smash around to your heart's content just to organically find new things. And if you are on a mission to explore every nook and cranny, a solid map and purchasable treasure maps give you plenty of tools to find everything if you're a completionist and want to find absolutely everything without feeling overwhelmed. Which brings me to my next major concern I had going in, and that is that it would in fact be totally overwhelming. And I'll chalk at least some of this up to being a gamer in my 40s instead of being a teenager, but I have almost no desire to hunt down every last secret in any video game nowadays. I appreciate that they're there, and I wouldn't knock anyone for wanting to collect 1,000 doohickeys in a game, but it's not really my cup of tea. That being said, I do appreciate variety in my games, and while Bananza certainly showcased that well before its release, I was also a little bit worried that it might be so overstuffed that I'd just sort of lose my drive to see it through to the end and roll credits. Plus, when I found out the Mario Odyssey team developed this game, and that game had nearly 1,000 Power Moons to collect, well, it didn't put me much at ease. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my time with Mario Odyssey, but it also felt weirdly disconnected from me at times, and sometimes just the sheer amount of things that were there to do was a little bit, well, overwhelming. But I'm happy to report that's definitely not the case here. Yes, each new layer you encounter is bursting with areas to explore and NPCs to meet, but somehow it all feels totally manageable. Some of that is thanks to Nintendo dedicating the left bumper button to instantly pointing you to your next main objective at any time with a colorful note trail, But even without that small bit of hand-holding, Bananza feels as sprawling or as focused as you'd like it to be. Sure, it's advantageous to get more bananas to upgrade DK's abilities, but even after drilling in for about 10 hours, I can't say that I've really encountered a scenario where I felt underprepared or ill-equipped for any of its challenges. Plus, the further in you get, the more rapidly bananas seem to start manifesting, so there's really no need to sweat finding everything in every level early in the game. All of this is to say Nintendo has crafted a game that easily scales up or down with the ambition of the player, without ever feeling too breezy for the veteran or too stiff a challenge for the absolute novice. Aside from charting a course to each new story beat, there's no explicit requirement that you engage with and master every single one of its systems, secrets, or collectibles, making this one of the easiest games to just vibe with that isn't a walking simulator I've seen in a while. And speaking of vibes, this last one wasn't my biggest concern, but it was definitely in the back of my mind before I went to purchase the game, and I was a little bit concerned they might rely too heavily on Donkey Kong Country nostalgia. And honestly, this might have been a little bit silly of me, but I mean, I feel like there's at least some precedent for it between Tropical Freeze and Donkey Kong Country Returns. Both of those are fun games, but I also felt like they kinda leaned hard into their Donkey Kong Country roots, which, as an old school fan, isn't inherently bad, but I'm always curious to see how decades-old characters can be elevated or remixed into something new. And when it came to Bananza, chiefly I was worried that beyond the fun of environmental destruction, that a lot of the bonus content would mostly be focused on 2D platforming levels in that same vein. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that couldn't have been further from the truth. For starters, I personally didn't even discover a 2D platforming level until about the 3 or 4 hour mark, and I think I've only found one other beyond that so far, so yeah, you're not just going to be falling into these non-stop. But when you do run across one of these 2D levels, they're better than you'd expect because even these remixes of classic levels and environments are updated with the same mechanics that you have in the 3D portions of Bananza, meaning your typical impediments like moving platforms or rock piles can be smashed through in exactly the same way, making for even more interesting level designs. Which, ironically, makes me kinda wish Nintendo would do another 2D Donkey Kong, where the smashing mechanic is baked in, so I can watch them flex that creativity on a more limited playing field. All of this is to say that when it comes to the nostalgia factor of Donkey Kong Bananza, I feel like they took a really Goldilocks approach here. I would say it features exactly the right amount of nostalgia that's been peppered through its levels, without being so reliant on it that you kind of feel like you've seen it all before. All that being said, I will say the first time I ran across a classic DK tune for my hideout, I immediately put it on the record player. So yeah, to wrap this whole thing up, I knew Donkey Kong Bananza was going to be a great game, but I definitely wasn't expecting it to so perfectly answer all of my preemptive and, well, totally unjustified criticisms. While we're still a few months out from the Game Awards, I've no doubt this will definitely be in the Game of the Year conversation, and as I've learned firsthand this past week, Donkey Kong definitely earns its place there. But hey, if you had some doubts too, let me know in the comments below, because maybe I wasn't the only one who thought this might be at least a little sort of, nostalgia cash grabby before it just completely demolished my expectations. Coming up on the channel, like I've been mentioning, I still have a pair of videos coming out about what I like more about the Steam Deck than the Switch 2, and also in the reverse direction, and I'm still thinking through some updated emulation content, so stay tuned for that. As always, thanks so much for your time, take care, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.